Step into the shadows of the unexplored with Paranormal M. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for our latest tales that will leave you pondering the mysteries of the universe. I saw a shadow entity, made 4 cars' lights flicker near it. In a town near Portland, Oregon, at about 7 or 8 p.m. on an overcast dark night in 2006, I saw a shadowy entity in the driveway across the street. I was playing World of Warcraft at the time. I recall I was playing my warlock, and I was in Shotrath City. I had positioned my computer so the window out of my second-story room was looking down the T of my neighborhood because I liked the view. I saw a flicker in my eye. I looked across the street to the driveway of my neighbor's house. They had 4 cars in the driveway when they normally only had 1 or 2. And only the porch light was on, not the driveway floodlight that they had above the garage door. I was a 2-car garage with cement stairs leading up to the left of the driveway to the main door. I saw something moving between the cars, but I couldn't make out any limbs or identifying features because it was so dark. In this area at night, when it's overcast, it gets extremely dark, almost pitch black, so it wasn't strange to me that I couldn't identify it. It just seemed like a person walking between the cars. Seemed average person height, at least. Well, then it sped up. Across maybe 5 seconds or so, went from walking speed to running speed, to maybe 30-ish miles an hour, zooming around all 4 cars in the driveway before it disappeared entirely. When it started speeding up to about bike riding speed, all of the lights started flickering in all of the cars. These were older cars. I recall an old maroon 4-door Civic-like car, not a car I would expect to have a fob or ability to flash like it was when it was off. Even the floodlight above the garage was flickering, lighting up the entire area. This thing was moving so fast I couldn't tell what it was, but it just was a shadow. Even with light, I couldn't see anything but blackness. Then the house lights, even inside the house, all of the lights flickered, not unison at all, for a solid 2-ish seconds before everything just clicked back to normal and it was done. I stared for a while after that. Nothing. I have no explanation, and to this day, I regret never going over there and asking the neighbors if they saw anything too. I didn't know them, and I was only about 16 at the time. I just told my mom, who told me weird stuff happens here. I went on to get a bachelor's in physics, actually, to see if I could find anything that made sense to fit my new worldview. And that was basically one big intro to a whole lot more questions than I'd ever anticipated having. I've thought through a multitude of possibilities, the most logical being a hallucination. But to my knowledge, I've never hallucinated before, then or since. Nor did anyone else around me hallucinate or have any strange symptoms, so I rule out carbon monoxide poisoning. I see other people stating that they've seen shadow people, but I'm not sure this was a person. Definitely don't know if it had a hat or was indeed the Hat Man. And it seems normal accounts of shadow people have then not zooming around and making lights flicker. And now I'm a father, have a wonderful wife and a great job, but this still takes up immense real estate in my head. Any direction or insight would be appreciated. Would particularly like to hear about or speak with others who have seen similar things. The Attic Picture. For some backstory, I used to live in this house for about 11 years. Once I had asked my mom if she had seen, heard, or experienced things in there. She told me that up in the attic, when her and my dad, were first moving in, she went in to store some things up there and noticed this weird door made of plywood. She opened it, and lo and behold, a small mattress that looked like it was for a child. Then she discovered a picture of a girl hanging from a single nail above the mattress. She examined the photo, and there was nothing written on the back of it, and nothing to indicate the time period except the girl's appearance. I still haven't been able to figure this out. And that was that, the whole story. Today, though, I went up to see for myself. See, I've been wanting to see this for about a year, and I got my chance today. The deal for the house closes on Friday, since it's currently on the market, and has a full offer put in. I went up with my dad and sister to see if we could find anything. We went into the small room, and I did see the tiny mattress. It was old and stained, and you could see the springs through the thin material. We looked around for about 10 minutes, and my main focus was on the picture. I eventually found it, but it wasn't hanging on the nail my mom described. It was right outside the small room on the floor. I picked it up and exclaimed, and carried it back downstairs. I had taken it outside with the intention of taking it to my current house, but I decided to put it back because it felt wrong to take it. Like something was telling me it was wrong. So I took some pictures of it and put it gently back on the attic steps. I said something along the lines of, "Here's your picture back, I'm sorry I took it," and then went back outside and got in the truck. When we got home, I was worried about something happening that correlated with the picture. So I thoroughly washed my hands. Then later, I deleted the pictures off my phone after I had shown some close friends that I'd previously told this story to. This wouldn't be as creepy, but my mom also told me about how she would find me in my room at that old house when I was small, and it appeared like I was talking to no one. She would ask me who I was talking to. I would say, "I'm talking to Lisa." Now, I don't know what to make of this, but if this is the little girl I used to play with as a little kid, what do I do? I'm worried about residual energy and something following me. The spirit that made me into a believer 19 years ago. This experience took place from 2003 to 2007, and because I was born in 1998, you should be able to understand that I'll do my best to give you a full in-depth recollection of this ghost. The only people I will mention that should appear in this post are my mother and my brother, who in the beginning is not yet born. He was born in 2004, so initially it is only my mother and I. A long time ago in my hometown, my mother and I moved into a duplex, where the landlord lived upstairs and we lived downstairs. This house, as I remember it, was older, but must have been remodeled because it looked very 2000s and not from the late 19th century. We had a front porch and a decent-sized backyard with a fireplace in the center of it. About as big as the yard can get in an urban in the middle of our street home. Now, for the layout of this duplex. I wasn't there when the moving of this furniture took place. I actually hung out with my aunt or my guardian. But the moment I stepped into our new home, I was excited. Excited to get on my CTR TV in all honesty. But anyways, when you first walk into this house, you'll find that our dinner table is directly to the right of the front door. Looking forward was the living room. The CTR TV sat on the floor like those models usually could. The couch was to the left wall. Farther back from the front door to the other side of the duplex was my slide door to the backyard. And to the left of that door, the computer and the desk against the left wall. Behind the couch was like some kind of counter. The wall was cut out to give you a view of the kitchen. To the right of that, the actual entrance to the kitchen. The kitchen was how you got to the 2 bedrooms, closet, and the bathroom. In fact, all of those rooms were connected. My bedroom and my mom's bedroom had no door, so you could always see what each other was doing. I had the closet that had the door to the bathroom. Bathroom having a closet door and a kitchen door. I do remember how everything else was laid out, but let me not bore you too hard. 2003. Finally, to the thing you're reading this for. The second thing I did after settling down into my new home was look out the sliding door to the backyard. Almost instantaneously, this experience introduces you to her. I don't have a name for her. She, the spirit, never said her name, nor do I remember what the history of the duplex said online. I thought nothing of the girl. I saw her staring down at the fireplace, and I remember that she was wearing something and what she looked like to this day. I don't remember her face, only her scar that I will reveal to you soon. She didn't turn around, so at this time, I never had seen her face. As she stared down at the fireplace unmoving, the sun reflected off her gorgeous golden hair, and she was wearing some kind of white dress. To be honest, that feels like a common thing with female spirits and dresses, doesn't it? The dress was gently being brushed by the wind. It was afternoon. The sun was high in the sky at this time, and yet, there she was. Little did 5 or 6-year-old me realize that she wasn't actually live or there. Little did I realize, but would soon learn that she was more than what she seemed. I think I asked my mother who she was. Mom would always ask me who I was talking about. She couldn't see her, yet I could. Every day, she would be there by the fireplace, in the same position all morning, staring at this fireplace. I never thought of approaching her for some reason, but I've been in the backyard plenty of times, and whenever I did go back there, she wasn't there. This next bit, I'm not sure if it was before my brother was born or after. But, because I actually have no memory of my brother during this moment, it had to be before. One day I was sitting at home by myself in the living room. It was the weekend, and my mom was working. So I decided to make a bowl of cereal and almost turn on the TV when suddenly out of nowhere, my soul is startled by the sound of a very loud robot voice that spoke an entire sentence. My thoughts were everywhere, scrambling to try to understand what I heard. Our landlord was quiet, pretty much never home, so I know it couldn't have come from upstairs. I merely remember that this great and powerful voice was all around me. Maybe it was in my head. I'm not sure, but she randomly entered into my thoughts. I somehow felt that her and that this one-timer voice were connected. I would never hear the deep electronic voice ever again. 2004 is when things started becoming increasingly real. 2004. This is the year where my brother would be born in October. So I have a few things I can recollect that I know for sure happened in this year. I feel that the activity increased throughout the years. By the time we moved out, she could do anything and has done a lot. 2004. What a year of nostalgia for me. I was as much of a gamer then as I am now at 23 years old. Although back then I would actually watch TV. My favorite show was, funny enough, Ghost Hunters. Today I don't really like or think that show is real, but back then I did. And she, my friendly ghost with no name, put fuel to that fire. There was this one day, sun out, and all where Mom was sitting in the living room. I could in fact see her head over the counter thing in the kitchen. I pulled out my back then childhood board game, Sorry, and said out loud, setting up in the middle of the kitchen floor, "Who wants to play a board game with me?" I'm not sure why I used who rather than do you, when the only person there, other than I, was my mother. She was talking about her CNA job with someone on her phone, so she was not listening to me. However, a voice of a young girl said something to the left side of me. To the left of me was the refrigerator, and to the front of the refrigerator was the entrance to my mother's bedroom. This voice said in a playful tone, "I do." I was fascinated, not frightened at all for some reason. To hear a voice coming from nowhere and pushing it off as a normal thing, I might add. "Okay," I said. "You go first." I pulled a card out for the voice, and I watched, and I waited. The card was an 8, and I gave the spirit the green pieces while I was red. Of course, and much to my disappointment, the green pieces did not move at all. They had to be moved by me. I ended up playing an entire game of Sorry by myself, feeling a very cold air around me. Again, I thought absolutely nothing of it. My mom eventually got up from the couch and went to the fridge to get something from it. That was when the cold air dissipated. I don't remember if my mom and I conversed, but eventually that night, things would change forever in that apartment. Night came, and I was sleeping soundly well into my dream world. I should say that this memory is very foggy, and I'm going to try to do my best to make sense of the conclusion of it. My dream was very abnormal. Everything around me fogged like an old Silent Hill video game, hiding the surroundings in a creepy, empty void. I was in my bed in the dream, and she, the blonde girl, was sitting in that gray void next to the bed. Her face was blurry as hell, but I knew something was wrong with it. Her hair was parted, and I don't actually think she had eyes. She was pale and looked like she sat in a fire. Her skin was covered in burns. She was sitting on her legs with a very friendly smile across her lips. "Hi, would you like me to read you a story?" she asked me. Then immediately began reading to me something from Mother Goose. She never gave me a glance to respond to her question. The entire dream went on like this. Her voice faded out slowly, and before I knew it, I would be awake again the following morning. Apparently, as I was sleeping, I got up out of bed and asked my mother about her. I described the girl to my mom, and everything. Yet, I remembered none of that. I was sleepwalking, both dreaming of the girl reading a book to me, while my body got up to tell my mother about the ghost. My mother brought it up to me eventually, and for some reason, I was confused as to what she was talking about. It was almost as if I completely forgot about the girl ghost. The next incident is a repetitive nuisance. Anytime Mom and I returned home, the living room TV remote would be laying face down in the center of the room, with the back cover missing, and a AA battery hidden in 2 places. We'd have to find them every single time. I wonder what my mother thought about all of this. I can only tell you in depth that my brother and myself. I think my mom must have been trying to make sense of the remote situation. Maybe she blamed it on me. Maybe she had incidents that I don't know about and didn't want to scare me. The remote game, as I called it on for months, it would finally stop once my brother was born. This is when things got even more real. I would have urges of jealousy and eagerness. I'd bring a butter knife in hand to try to suffocate my brother, and I loved the kid so much I can't explain why I would make such violent attempts. I would stop myself before I did anything. I don't actually remember grabbing the knife, ever in fact. My brother was never harmed, but the spirit girl had plans with him. For a while, the house was quiet. Time passes. I do not recall any more incidents for 2004. 2005. I can basically sort out these memories through the video games I played. This year was when Star Wars Battlefront 2 was released, though I was playing quite a lot of Star Wars Bounty Hunter and Destroy All Humans. My brother, who I will, for the sake of naming him, will call him Austin. He was becoming talkative and still in a crib at the time of this next incident. This incident consisted of a second dream that signaled the return of her. She was not absent long since that last incident I described. This time she was going to be moving things and people while you were there, and you could see it in your peripherals. She would talk a lot more, but I could no longer see her in 2005. In fact, she ditched me for my brother to become his imaginary friend. The first incident of 2005. She appeared in my dreams to read me, the itsy bitsy spider, but my brother was there next to me. My bed was outside in the backyard, and she was sitting in the middle of the fireplace, reading to both of us. The second incident initiates her power. I was sitting in my bed in pitch black. My mom's room, which I'm able to see from my bed, had my brother's crib around the corner, just on the other side of the wall of my bed. I'm sitting there trying to sleep, when all of a sudden, I hear footsteps from the kitchen to my brother's crib. I watch, fixing my eyes and adjusting to the dark. There was absolutely no one there. I then heard something dragging and a thud. Out came my already walking brother, who had no way of getting out of the crib. It was too high for him to do so. So, walked up to me, not creeped out at all compared to me, speaking gibberish. I went to tell Mom that Austin got out of his crib somehow. She told me to get back to bed, since she'll take care of him. Creeped out, I remained in bed staring at my ceiling for a while. I made friends with my next-door neighbor in 2005. His name was Isaiah, but he never really experiences any of these incidents with me. If he has, I don't know about it. I only mention him to bring up his house sitting to the right of my house. I was social for a time, and being quite the daredevil. At night was when the spirit would do things in front of me. One in particular was my brother in that little jumper thing babies sit in and walk around in. Note that somehow he walked to my side of the bed that night, yet he can't really walk like that. He was bouncing around and beating up all of the spinning circles, pressing buttons, dancing to the audio music, when suddenly I noticed that he got real quiet. I was playing Pac-Man World 2 in my mom's bedroom while he was in the kitchen. So right outside the doorway, he was staring at about my height, but nowhere in my direction. He was looking to the small open space to the left of the refrigerator and talking. Austin was laughing and talking gibberish with someone that he thought was there. Mom noticed this too, and we were like, "Austin, who are you talking to?" He would do this for a while. He actually got out of his crib one more time eventually this year. But I'm not sure when that was. But I remember carrying him and barely being able to lift him over the corner of the crib onto it. I have one more thing in 2005, and honestly, I think this is probably the coolest incident I have of a spirit. It was nighttime, and I was playing Star Wars Bounty Hunter. My mom's bed had a little lamp on the left side of it. Out of my peripherals, I saw the corner of her bed's blanket lift up into the air and drop back down when I attempted to directly look at what in blazes was going on. Again, I was thrilled rather than chilled. If I were to guess what the ghost girl was doing, she was probably laying in my mom's bed to watch my brother in his crib. At this point, I no longer hear or see her, so I can only make guesses of where she's standing, based on peripheral sightings, or what my brother was up to. My brother was sleeping when this happened. 2006. There's not much that I can remember of this year, but I could ask my brother about his experiences eventually. I remember at least two things. One of them was how I was having emotions that were not my own. I'd be stuck in trances. There is no known order of events of this year. The closet that connects my bedroom to the bathroom was a point of interest this year for me. Something always told me that whenever my nose bled, or if I bled anywhere at all, to wipe it all over the walls of the closet. At night, I felt like someone was watching me from the keyhole. One day, I suddenly felt so depressed and aimless that I took a stool and stared at the oven clock for about 5 hours straight. Neither Mom or Austin was home, so I was left there uninterrupted. My thoughts were creepy. I was remembering a fire, yet I never experienced a fire as big as I was imagining. 2007. Austin is talking great by now. I began hearing laughter and footsteps in my mom's bedroom, and Austin would sleep in the same bed as Mom. The crib was removed at this point, and the TV in the bedroom area was moved at least 3 times. That TV was new at the time, yet there was a day where I was playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2003. The TV was sitting on the floor next to Mom's bed, and I sat right in front of it. The TV turned itself off. I heard the button clank and everything. So I turned the TV back on. I continue to play the game, and the TV does the same thing. It turns off, and the sound of the button on the TV being pressed can be heard. I sat there and grumbled. I turned the TV on again, and I sit there and watch the power button of the TV waiting for it to turn off again. Sure thing, I see the button being pushed into the TV. The loud click sound these old CRTV buttons had, and the static of the TV screen dissolving. I never left a bedroom so fast. The The TV remote throughout this year would get thrown around, and I was able to see the ghost girl again. Austin and I saw her staring at the backyard fireplace. One night we had people over and had a bonfire, and I remember seeing the spirit hovering in a tree branch above us, staring at the fire. Do you remember when I said that she looked like she was burned alive in that dream a few years back? Her dress was now dirty, and her face was not blurry anymore. I couldn't make out any facial features. Eventually, my mom would look up the history of this apartment. At some point in the 1900s, the duplex was set on fire, and this girl my brother and I always saw was caught in the middle of it. She passed away in either the bedroom or the living room. My friend next door and I started not to get along, and before any of that got worse, my mom, my brother, and I moved out. The day came where we'd see that house one last time. Mom pulled out of the driveway, and Austin and I were in the back seat. On our porch, I saw her again. She had her hand on the railing watching us drive off. I asked Mom, "Is she coming with us?" My mom, scared by my question, responded with, "Hell no, she isn't," and sped away. 2 years later, my friend's house would mysteriously be set on fire from the side of their house facing the duplex. My friend's house was completely destroyed. I believe that duplex is still there to this day. In fact, I'm going to go look it up on Google Maps in a minute. Random clapping sounds in my house. Just for context, my wife and I have lived in our house for almost 10 years. During a majority of this time, we've had 0 paranormal experiences. About half a year ago, my mother-in-law passed away. She was really close with my wife, and obviously had been hard on her. Since her passing, a few odd things have happened. A knocking here and there, but quite enough to disregard as being something other than paranormal. The sound of doors closing gently, which had never happened before, but we just assumed it was heating and cooling. Partially open door, perhaps. Which we've never seen, heard, or witnessed happen. But we just debunked the most weird occurrences to something other than paranormal. My first major experience was when my wife was out of town for work about a year ago. I had video called my wife, and we talked about it for half an hour. She decided she was going to bed. I decided to make Jack a Coke and relax for a bit before I went to bed. So I made my drink, and while I'm stirring it up, the shot glass slides about 8 inches across the counter. There was no water or alcohol on the counter that could be assisted it to being slid. I tried to recreate it, to no avail. So, officially spooked a bit, I had to call my wife back. She calmly says, "My mom must just be hanging out with you having a drink." I kind of felt honored that she'd hang out with me, and just went along with it and tried to enjoy my drink. So over the next year or so, the same sounds kept happening, but nothing like the shot glass. Until about a few weeks ago. It was about p.m., and my 14-year-old daughter was over for the weekend. I was showing her our newly remodeled bathroom, which was down the hallway from our kitchen, maybe 20 to 30 feet, and we heard a loud clap sound, and my wife says, "The fuck was that?" So we come out to see what happened, and she initially assumed that it was me sneaking up behind her and clapping. But I assured her that we were both in the bathroom, not anywhere in the proximity of where we heard the clap. We were all kind of in shock. We all heard it loud and clear. We were all standing around talking about it, and then all of a sudden there's another loud clap which sounded like it was just a few feet away from my head, and in between where my daughter and I were standing. I physically felt the vibrations in the air. We were all stunned again and in disbelief about it. We all just kind of joked that it was my mother-in-law letting us know that she's still around us or something like that. Now it's been a few weeks. I've had no new occurrences or sounds till about 45 minutes ago. My wife was in the garage and heard another loud clap. The garage door was closed. Everyone in the house. She was all alone. I heard the clap from inside the house, but just assumed that it was her making it somehow. She came inside and told me that she heard the clap again, and I told her I had heard it as well. Definitely something paranormal in my opinion. But has anyone had something similar to this? Would love to hear your experiences or opinions. Haunted house with whistling. So I just discovered this sub, and I really want to share this somewhat short story. Back in the summer of 2016, as a teen, I went with a family friend to their home in China, specifically Tianjin. Note that they are wealthy and the home was very large. In the first few nights while in bed, I heard whistling sounds around the house, but chalked it up to my friend's family just making a tune. The whistling tune occurred every 1 or 2 minutes to an hour and was made up of 2 notes, a higher note and a lower note that prolonged a bit. A few more days in, I was home alone due to a family needing to attend the emergency, and I heard the whistling again, and happened at different areas of the house. I was too scared to go outside my room to check, so I waited till morning. I checked everywhere around the house, but it just doesn't make sense as to what can make that whistling sound that can occur all around the house. Then, my breaking point. As I was packing up my stuff to go see family in Hong Kong on the next day, I heard the whistling again, but next to my ear, when I was in the pitch-dark stairway. My goodness. I hurried to the living room, turned on the TV to watch some random movie on full blast. I think it was Judge Dredd, LOL, and just sat still for a while. I said fuck it to the rest of my packing and just decided to wait till morning on the couch and GTFO to the airport. About a couple of weeks later, I came back a bit nervous, but felt a bit better as my friends and their family are back, so I could ignore the situation. I took a nap after the long travel and experienced the worst nightmare I ever had. I still remember it quite vividly, and basically it was my relatives all as undead demons, and I was being chased, but could not escape. To this day, this was my creepiest experience. In someone who tends to not be superstitious, I believe those events were horrifyingly paranormal. Dreaming a friend contacted me. I'm going to start this out really blunt, and I'm sorry for that, but there's really no other way for me to start it. I have a friend that died a few years ago. He and I used to be very close. Our main forms of contact was always texts and messages on Facebook before Messenger, or calls because we lived in different states. He helped me through a lot. We grew apart, due to being on different paths. He was an active duty military. I became a mom and got married. But we always touched base with each other occasionally. He died in 2017. A few months later, I got a notification on my phone that his name had joined Messenger saying hi. That stupid Messenger notification you get when somebody downloads it. I went straight into a panic attack brought on by grief. I rationalized it away as maybe his fiancée or his parents had downloaded it to check his messages or something. Last year in October, I had a dream. I was on my phone. Weird, because I never see phone calls in my dreams. And I got a message notification with the little picture bubble and everything. Him. Hey, just checking in. How are you doing? Me. What? What's going on? This has to be a joke. Who is this? Him. It's me. What are you talking about? How are you doing? How are the kids? Side note, I only had one child when he was alive. Second was born about 1.5 years after he died. Me. You're doing good. I still don't understand. Him. I gotta go check. I'll check again later. Needless to say, I was all kinds of freaked out. I don't know if it was wishful thinking or he actually visited me, but I feel and hope that it was actually visitation. Little stories about my paranormal experience in my old house. Not really scary. When I was a little kid, between the ages of 5 and 6, I think, me and my family lived in a pink house in a little quarter sack in Apex, North Carolina. The house was built on a cemetery. The builders moved the tombs, but not the bodies. I don't know why. Now, I don't have any memories about the house, so my parents told me stories when we lived there. Story 1. The Greedy Children. This story is very short, but my father told me that the 2 children would take me and my sister's toys. So, this happened when a babysitter came to look after us. Me and my sister went to play in the room up in the attic. When my father came back home, he said that he found us arguing with someone. When he asked us who we were talking to, we said, "The children won't let us play with our toys." Story 2. The Man at My Bedside. So me and my sister slept in the same room in a bunk bed. My mom and dad said that I would wake up and I would tell them that there was a man who sat at the end of my bed. Now this would happen often, but not too often. I don't remember the man, but still gave me chills sometimes. Story 3. Paintings and Children. My house had a hall where we would hang up paintings. My dad said that sometimes they would just plop off. This went off very often. My dad also said that he heard someone running up and down the hall. To him, they sounded like children playing. Mirror in the bathroom. My mom and dad were sleeping when the mirror in the bathroom fell down and crashed. Now this sounds normal, like it could have been loose or something. But, according to my parents, the mirror fell and was through out of the bathroom, then crashed. Story number 5. Mom? Very short, but I remember when I was falling asleep, I saw an outline of a woman leaving my bedroom. I called out to the outline saying, "Mom," but it didn't respond. I simply shrugged it off and went to bed. Story 6. Lady in Red. My father told me this story. So one night my dad and his aunt were watching a movie and drinking wine. My dad said that he heard something behind him, so he turned around and saw a lady walking down the staircase. According to him, the lady wore a very fluffy scarf and had a long casier in her mouth. The lady looked at them and said, "Get out," then walked through the floor. His aunt was very concerned, and my dad just said, "Just keep drinking." When I was growing up, There was one door in my childhood home, built in 1872, that had a strange, bright static-like sparkle on it. What was it? Probably best to prefix this with the fact that I'm not a believer. However, there are some things in my life, most of which happened in this house, that I cannot explain. This being one of them, and peculiar as it happened many times from ages 5 to 17. A static-like sparkle existed on a single bedroom door. It was about 50 centimeters high, 30 centimeters wide, existed on the top half of the door, and looked like television static but whiter and softer. As I walked into the room, the sparkle on the right side of me, and I exited the room, it was on the left side of me. So it was on a fixed point of the door, and not in my eye, so to speak. It would only exist in my peripheral, and disappeared if I looked at it directly. However, it would still be there in my peripheral when I turned my head back. To me, it looked like an artist's depiction of energy. I often thought about reaching out and touching it, but never found the courage due to the stories of negative paranormal activity of this house. The reason the previous owner had moved. The sparkle would come and go over the years, staying for a week or two and then disappearing. Until I got to about 14, and then it became a memory. As I entered adulthood, I always thought about the strange sparkle, as the room with the door became my bedroom. Then, when I was 17, now feeling like a rational human, the sparkle returned. It actually panicked me, and I even moved rooms. I moved out of the house entirely, not too long after that, but never got an answer as to what it was. But it is still something I think about every few months, and something as I get older only leaves me with more questions. My paranormal experiences as a kid. So this took place about 20 years ago. I was 7 at the time, and my family, consisting of my mom, her boyfriend, and my sister, had just moved into a new house. It was located just outside of a suburb, so we had neighbors within walking distance, and civilization was just a 5-minute drive away. This was a pretty big house. Downstairs was the living room, kitchen, bathroom, dinner room, and a small room for the washing machine. Upstairs was 3 bedrooms and a small bathroom. One last thing. It's important to know that when you walked into the house, the staircase would be immediately to your right, and you could see the walkway that led to the bedrooms. It all started with my mom. She was working nights, so there were several days per week that she had off, so she was often alone in the house during the days. One day she had done some laundry and was carrying it into my room, which was the biggest room in the house, located at the far left of the upstairs hallway. She put my clothes in a closet, closed it, and walked away. But as she reached the doorstep, the closet opened. Confused, she went back and closed it, but still the same result. Although this was a closet door where you had to twist the handle and pull for it to open, she didn't think much of it. But this kept happening almost every time that she went into my room. On top of this, she started to feel this intense feeling of someone watching her in there. As soon as she stepped foot into my room, an immense pressure came over her chest, and all she could think about was how to get out of the room. She later told me that she would sometimes wait with whatever business she had there until someone else was home. And apparently, she had told friends how she was not comfortable with me sleeping in that room. Then we have little old me. My mom didn't tell me any of her experiences as I was a young lad, and she did not want to frighten me. but I had also started to feel the same feeling that she had. Neither creepypastas or YouTube were a thing when I had not started watching horror movies, so I had a hard time identifying the feeling. I would often avoid spending time in my room if I was alone because it just felt scary. I also heard the sound of the closet doors opening. I would have nightmares about people coming into my room. I don't remember this, but my mom has told me that I sometimes would talk in my sleep. Their bedroom was next to mine, in parentheses, and say stuff like, "Get out!" Then we have the experience that I remember most clearly. It was around 3 in the afternoon. I had just arrived home from school. The rest of my family was away grocery shopping. This was not unusual. I had been home alone multiple times. So I walk up to the house, open the door, and just get inside, and I hear something. Loud breathing coming from upstairs. Then I hear heavy footsteps, slow but determinate. They go from my room to the stairs. I bolt outside, scared half to death. My first thought was that a burglar was inside the house. I waited in the rain for 30 minutes before my family came home, and I told them about what had happened. They found nothing. I thought I would end this by retelling an experience my mother's boyfriend had. He was and is a skeptic towards anything paranormal. So one evening we had a friend over. My mom was at work. I was at a friend's house and my sister was sleeping upstairs. It's important to note that my sister was 3 at this time. He was in the living room, which was located downstairs underneath my room, watching some TV with a friend. They're talking and having a good time. Suddenly, they are interrupted by a thud above them, in my room. And then they hear slow, heavy footsteps going from my room and stopping at the stairs. They both freeze up and fix their gaze on the top of the stairs. After a couple of seconds, they remember my little sister being asleep upstairs, so they gather the courage to rush upstairs but find nothing. The friends got so spooked by this that he went home, and my mother's boyfriend eventually admitted that even he could not explain it. The Smiling Lady! ! The incident is from the Mad Islands, a bunch of islands in the outskirts of Mumbai, the capital of the Indian state of Maharashtra. Mad Islands are still not very well developed. It is still considered a remote place with roads built around forest areas. Not all parts of the roads are well lit by streetlights. Some don't even have them. Only very few residential properties are there. Around 12 years ago, Sumukhi, a friend of the narrator, went to visit one of her friends who used to live on Mad Island. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It was around 1 a.m. Luckily, she found an empty taxi passing by. She sat down at the back seat. After a few moments of driving, Sumukhi noticed that someone was sitting beside her, an old lady with a big, creepy smile on her face. Dressed up in a white sari, a traditional dress of Indian women, sat beside her, but not looking toward her, but staring in front, not looking towards Sumukhi. Sumukhi noticed all of this in the corner of her eyes. She could not believe if this was all real. She did not dare to take a look, as if she did, all of this would become real. She could see that the lady was smiling, not even by looking at her, just from her peripheral vision. Sumukhi was frozen, her face gray pale, not knowing what to do, fear growing every moment that would happen as if she turned her head to see her. At this point, tears rolled down her eyes, praying to God that her destination arrive soon. She kept her eyes straight the whole time. Nobody talked throughout the journey. A few minutes pass by and she reaches the destination. The taxi stops outside the front gate of her friend's villa. It would soon take a minute's walk to reach the doorbell, as it was a huge villa. Sumhu-ki tells the driver to drop her inside, in front of the door. For some reason, the driver hesitates, but gives it to Sumhu-ki to assist him, now crying. She is unable to take it anymore. She just wants to jump out of the taxi and run as fast as she can, but doesn't want the driver to leave her alone. The car drops her in. The old lady is still sitting, smiling, but not looking at Sumhu-ki. As soon as the car stops, Sumhu-ki jumped out of the car and gave the driver the money, still not looking at the lady, still crying. But as soon as the driver took the money, he looked at Sumhu-ki with a blunt face, somewhat scared, and asked her, "Ma'am, did you see that lady too?" From the Mouth of Babes. I was watching my grandchild that evening. It was a quiet evening, and after cooking and eating dinner that I had prepared for my grandchild, I retired to the living room to watch the news, leaving my grandchild playing in the hallway outside my bedroom door so I could keep an eye on her. My grandchild was a sweet 5-year-old, and I left her coloring and playing with her dolls quietly. I sat in my living room chair, turned on the television, turning the sound down on low so I could hear my little ones if she called out for me for anything. After about an hour or so, I head down to her, in conversation with someone. There was no one else in the house besides myself and her who she could have a conversation with. I sat dumbfounded, thinking that it must be her playing with her dolls. I dismissed it, turned my attention to what was transpiring on the television screen. After a few minutes and the conversation with my grandchild still going on, I began to listen in on her conversation with what I thought was her dolls. However, to my amazement, the conversation was well beyond just playing with her dolls. She was asking questions, and it seemed like someone, although I could not hear them, was in turn responding back to her. My curiosity kept me glued to the seat as I listened for another minute or two, before deciding to go and see whom or what she was interacting with. Before I could get up and out of my seat, she stepped into the room with me, sat down beside me, and asked, "Sweetheart, who were you talking to? Were you playing with your dolls?" She turned and looked up at me and said, "No, Grandma, I was talking to your mama and daddy." I said, "Baby, you couldn't possibly be talking to Mother and Father. They've been dead for so many years now." My grandbaby looked at me very seriously and matter-of-factly and said, "Granny, they were asking me questions about you and how you were doing. Granny, they told me to tell you that they love and miss you." From that night on, there was never a mention from her about my deceased parents, and this never happened again, when it was just the two of us at the house. However, without a single doubt in my mind, I know that evening my parents were there checking in on me through my grandbaby. This incident still brings tears to my eyes when I think or talk about it. Ghost in a Kimono, a true experience. I used to put my daughter to bed by reading her story and sitting in front of her until she went to sleep. This allowed me to spend much-needed quality time with her after a very long day on the job. We started to notice that when we woke up in the mornings to go to daycare, she always complained of being tired. After a few weeks of her complaining to be tired and not wanting to get up for school, we started to question her. I knew for a fact that she was going to sleep, because many of the nights I had fallen asleep on her floor, and upon waking to take myself to bed, I would notice that she was sound asleep. After some prompting and questioning her, this is the story that she told us. It seems that very late in the evening, after we were all in bed asleep, she would be awakened by an old lady with a very colorful long dress that would tickle her feet and wake her up at night. My daughter exclaimed. The lady never spoke, just smiled, gave her a couple of tickles on her feet, and just sat and watched over her until she fell back asleep. This occurrence happened for over a month, and although I made it to the point to spend the night in her room a couple of times just to confirm or debunk her claims, this apparition still came in the quiet of the night after I was asleep and continued the ritual, despite the fact my large butt was laying on the floor. I never heard my daughter stir and never caught a glimpse of the old lady. At one point, my daughter happened to see a photo of a person wearing a colorful kimono, at which point she exclaimed that the lady had been visiting her, wore a colorful dress just like that. Not the same one in the picture, but similar. Now my daughter is half Japanese, and at that point in her life she had never worn or seen anyone in a kimono. She was just dead set that this was a similar dress to what the old lady wore upon entering her room and interacting with her. After many discussions with my wife, we chalked it up to my wife's grandmother, who may have been doing the visitations. My wife had been close to her grandmother, and was the first one at a very young age to find her grandmother deceased in the bathtub. Needless to say, it was a traumatic experience for my wife, who again was very close to her grandmother. Prompting more of a description of the kindly old lady for my daughter. As to what the lady looked like, it was confirmed that it was my wife's grandmother visiting the grandchild she never got to see. We were overjoyed by this, and yet broken up, and wished we had the chance or ability to see her and express our love and thanks for looking over our daughter. However, as the month passed, with my daughter being awoken every night and tired in the morning, with a heavy heart, I went into my daughter's room while everyone was out of the house, and with the utmost respect and reverence, asked grandmother not to wake the baby anymore. She needed her rest for school, and that she loved her, and we were happy that she wanted to visit and see her grandchild, but could no longer wake her up to let her see her. Truly, it was one of the hardest and most heartfelt things I had done, but I knew it was right. The next evening, my daughter had a sound sleep. When asked, she told us that the old lady had come to say goodbye and never showed herself again. As I write this, I'm so thankful that from beyond the grave, grandmother wanted to see and meet my granddaughter, her granddaughter. And although we have never had another encounter with the grandmother in the kimono, I know that she's still out there, watching over our family. Devil in Disguise. This story comes down from my grandparents, who grew up in a small town in El Salvador. This is one among many encounters with the paranormal in their lives. Like many in El Salvador, my grandparents come from a town deeply religious and entrenched in the Catholic faith. Angels and demons are a real part of everybody's lives. My grandmother was 9 months pregnant with my uncle when her water finally broke. It was the middle of the night. Unfortunately for my grandparents, their house was on the other side of the town river, where lighting was poor and roads were made of dirt. To get to the town center to catch a ride to the hospital, my grandparents needed to walk across a narrow, poorly lit bridge and up a large hill. an uneasy trek even when you're not getting ready to give birth. As my grandparents reach the river, they can hear the flow of the water and the cool breeze. My grandfather tells my grandmother to stay strong and focused. This is no time to be caught off guard. As they're about to walk across the bridge, my grandmother hears a cry, a little girl, barefoot and sitting on a rock by the river. "Help me," she says. She can't be more than 5 years old. The little girl is looking right at my grandmother. "Help me, I have a splinter in my foot." My grandmother immediately feels a sense of motherly duty, and it came over her as the little child tends to her foot. My grandmother becomes very concerned for this little girl sitting on a rock in the middle of the night. She approaches the little girl who's got tears streaming down her face. As she reaches closer, my grandfather leaps in between them. He takes out his machete, and with a swift movement, he makes the sign of a holy cross with her in front of the little girl. To my grandmother's amazement, the girl disappears immediately. My grandfather turns to her and says, "You know better than this. You know the evil disguises itself as innocent and inviting as it can." My grandmother begins to sob and thanks my grandfather as they continue their journey to the hospital. My encounter with a ghost back in 2000. This happened when I was 13 years old, spending the Christmas holiday abroad in a rural part of France. My parents are French, and I was born in France, but I grew up in Canada since I was 2 years old. We spent a lot of summer and winter holidays there. I was staying with relatives of mine in their house when this occurred, which was a very old farmhouse. One particular day, my cousins and I decided to stay inside for the day because it was snowing heavily. We spent most of the day just wasting time and horsing around. A little later in the afternoon, my older cousin and I went up into the attic together because she was looking for something, and I followed her because I was curious to see the attic. There was a lot of stuff up there that interested me, like old books and some antique items. Once she found what she needed, I asked her if it was okay if I stayed up there for a while to look around. She giggled and said something to the effect of, "Why? It's just a bunch of old shit up here, but yeah, if you want to." I spent about half an hour walking around looking at stuff until I happened upon some old book from the early 1800s that seemed intriguing to me because I was and am a bit of a literature nerd. I sat down and read it for a little while before deciding that I wanted to take it back to my bedroom to read every night before bed. When I closed the book and went to stand up, my gaze immediately shifted over to a woman who was sitting in a chair on the left side of the room. This briefly startled me at first and made me gasp because I'd never seen her before, and I didn't hear her come into the attic. She was wearing very old clothing, had long blonde hair, and she was quite pretty. She looked like she was somewhere between 25 and 30 years old. She didn't look solid, though. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. She wasn't like the stereotypical Hollywoodized translucent ghost, but she had certain opaqueness about her that tells you on an instinctual level that you're not just looking at a living biological entity. She smiled and said to me, "Oh boy, this is French. Désolé si je vous ai fait peur, ma chérie." Sorry if I scared you. At this point, I didn't feel any fear or apprehension at all. This apparition radiated a kind, warm, and positive energy that I could somehow feel right down to my core, and I felt safe in her presence. It was a very brief encounter. Around 5 seconds after she spoke, she stood up, walked about 7 feet to the right of the room, and faded away mid-stride. I just silently sat there, dumbfounded, for a few minutes. When I left the attic, I was hesitant to tell anybody about what I saw, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, I decided to privately ask my youngest cousin about it. She was 8 years old, and I figured that younger kids are usually a little more open to things like this and less judgmental than teenagers and adults. To my surprise, she was quite candid about it. When I asked her if she had seen a lady who appears out of nowhere, she responded, "Do you mean the blonde lady?" When I nodded, she said something to the effect of, "Yeah, I see her sometimes. It's okay, she's nice." She told me that she had been seeing her since she was about 5 years old. We didn't really talk about it more. I didn't tell anybody else what I had seen. It's something that will always vividly stick in my memory because it was so surreal. I can still visually see her face when I close my eyes. I never did find out who she is. The fact that the farmhouse was very old would lead me to believe that she most likely lived there at one time. I don't think that all ghosts are forlorn spirits yearning for something. I've read stories about some that come across as harmless and seem happy. Maybe some of them occasionally enjoy visiting places where there are lots of fond memories for them. My paranoia is at an all-time high. My mom believes I'm a sensitive person in some way, whether that be empathic or a little bit more than that. I'm not so much a believer that I'm those, but I am a believer in paranormal occurrences. This week I've been having a lot of issues sleeping or staying asleep. I suffer from insomnia, especially when I have too much going on with my mental health. School full-time, work full-time, and focus on a big move is making me stressed nonetheless. When this happens, I typically can have a lucid dream, but lately I feel as though I'm losing control of my dreams with weird things happening in them and outside of them. From my sister getting swept away in a tornado, to ghostly figures escaping a satanic setting, to freakish lightning storms, all of which are normal when I'm under heavy amounts of stress. Last night, I had an experience that left me confused. I fell asleep around 1 a.m. I get up for work at around 8:30 a.m., so it's not terrible sleep, but isn't great. Throughout the night, I had been in and out of my sleep, or feeling like I'm not dipping into the needed REM. I fell into lucid slumber. The setting was my old preteen to adulthood home that had sat on a lonely hill. The nearest neighbor wasn't far, but it was a walk. The backside of the house had a full view of the valley below, and other mountains across this valley. It was a manufactured home, but in my dream, it lacked repair and seemed abandoned. My parents were there along with my fiancé. It was evening, or maybe even dark or twilight. The sky was blood red. The storm was brewing. Distant thunder with blood-red flashes in the sky. A wild pack of dogs roamed the 20-acre property as if to hunt something down, or maybe run away from something. The house didn't have windows, and the doors were torn up, wood doors that didn't look like they could keep even the biggest of dangers out. Basically, all of the Halloween vibes you could think of. I felt nervous and out of control of what was happening. The storm got closer, and my mom told my stepdad not to go outside. He didn't listen. He seemed mesmerized by the sky. He stepped outside onto our paved gravel driveway just outside our front door leading to our garage. Staring at the sky, not breaking contact with my mom, who was now yelling at him to get back inside. I then felt as though I was sucked away into the sky, as if a hand came down and picked me up. And then I hovered over him and could see him staring. He was staring at me. He reached up with both arms and shot down at him as if I was lightning. Then I woke. It was hot. I was dizzy. My fiancé was sweating in his sleep, which is a regular occurrence. Human furnaces, am I right? I laid in bed and listened. It was quiet. I should sleep. I need to, I told myself. I laid there spinning in this daze. Maybe I needed water. Maybe if I just closed my eyes, I could just sleep. I closed my eyes to stop spinning. We lived in a very small cabin about the size of most people's living rooms. There's a loft above the front door, a small kitchenette on the left, a couch on the right. Behind the couch is our very small room that fits our queen-sized bed and our dog kennel for our pups, and a bathroom behind the kitchenette, all as if to walk in the front door. I laid there getting the courage to either go back to sleep, because it's an emotional battle of its own, or get water. I'm lazy. I tried to sleep. God, why can't I sleep? Hello? I opened my eyes. Did I hear someone? I heard hello. Not possible if it's just us that lives there. It's a newer cabin, too. There's no way. I'm not doing this. I need to sleep. I laid there and spinning continued. I needed water. I sat up. The spinning immediately stopped. I know I heard that. It sounded like it came from the couch. I peeked around the corner. I wasn't scared, but curious. Nothing was there. It was silent. Fiancé was asleep. So were the pups. All cuddled in their bed. And on my legs. Damn dogs. It was silent. Very quiet. Water isn't worth this right now. I lay back down, going back into my spinning spell. Why can't I sleep? Hello? My eyes shot open. It was an impatient female voice. Came from the couch. Nobody was there when I checked before. And then, as suddenly as I woke, I fell back asleep, as if my body chose to sleep over the paranoia, the vertigo, and the stress this brought me. As if my body said, "This is taking too much energy. I'll handle it from here." I didn't dream after that, but woke to my alarm and came out of another spinning slumber. I've never heard anything vocal before, and it didn't necessarily startle me, but confused me more than anything. I've had many experiences, but this seemed to be the most of what I felt, as something present. Maybe tonight I'll rest. That's the end of today's stories. As usual, I heard your comments, and this particular reading was a response to a rather loud comment that I had read, insinuating that I sounded like a valley girl. And therefore, I removed all of the inflections that were present in the voice as much as I could while reading these sentences, and removed as many question mark sounding cadences as I could possibly find here. So, let me know down below if you enjoyed that, or if you prefer my regular voice speaking how I normally do. And, as always, have a great night. See ya.